I keep finding excuses lately to deviate away from the peak sustainability that came with a partly raw carnivore diet. Whether it's cooking more interesting foods for my girlfriend, wanting metabolic flexibility, seeing other influencers quit and make nuanced points about why, and to be honest, mostly just getting high and then choosing higher dopamine foods over the unsalted blue rare meat. The thing is, whenever I stray away from carnivore, even slightly, I find myself falling back into unsustainable eating habits. An appropriate carnivore diet for me is so sustainable because it's perfectly satiating, highly nutritious, anti-bloating, anti-inflammatory, and there's no risk of overeating. You also lose all the carb cravings when you're fat adapted, so the idea that it's a form of orthorexia is just fallacious and untrue. The problem for me with non-animal products, and even some carnivore-friendly foods like salted dairy, is that I don't receive as good a satiety signals, so I want to keep eating more than I need. But I don't keep on eating more because, for better or worse, I'm adapted to my raw carnivore waistline, and any food that isn't plain meat will cause visible bloating, which I just despise. The combination of these two things just makes me feel like I'm stuck in the vicious dieting cycle again, like I was on my high-carb whole foods diet that made me develop leptin resistance. This is where you don't receive the proper satiety signals after eating, so you're never completely satisfied after a meal. I like to say that I was chronically hungry for 2 years straight, but also chronically undereating because of my body dysmorphia, which only existed because I was eating these insulinogenic bloating foods. Even though my whole foods diet appeared healthy compared to the norm, it was completely unsustainable, which is why I cheated on it every single weekend. I never cheat on carnivore though, because you're not being restrictive to adhere to some rule book. You're simply just prioritizing the foods that you know make you feel your best. So the reason I've been trying new foods in the first place is because I recently realized just how well I healed my leaky gut from doing a strict carnivore approach for over 3 months. And this gave me the idea that I can be a little more metabolically flexible with suboptimal foods, which isn't the worst premise, but it just doesn't work as well in practice. I started reincorporating things like pasteurized dairy, fruit, low-carb veggies, nuts, and flavorings, and it was just really a slippery slope, because when you understand the biochemistry about what these foods actually break down into, then you can kind of easily keep justifying reintroducing even more suboptimal foods, because they have a pretty similar effect on your body. This is why people with past food addictions need to be so careful when they play around with keto and carnivore baking, because it's so easy to open up the floodgate of carb binging again. This didn't happen for me because I am super disciplined, to be honest, but that's almost even worse because I just sit there craving the foods, but I don't allow myself to eat them. And I want to make it clear that the negative effects are not all mental. My skin quality and digestion definitely aren't as good when I stray from carnivore. Although that being said, I was at the restaurant the other night and I ate some spicy curry with some coconut rice, mango lassi, and a salted cumin lassi, and I had no noticeable problems. This to me is just the biggest testament to carnivore healing my leaky gut. But in some ways, knowing that I can get away with eating like this is kind of dangerous too, because at the end of the day, eating foods like this is going to cause so much inflammation in the long run, and the only reason that I can get away with it now and again is because of carnivore, because God forbid I try to eat like that while I was on whole foods. I also want to say that I don't actually fear glycation damage or an insulin spike causing weight gain that much. I'm young, lean, and active enough that it's not really an issue. A random cycle activation here and again is pretty negligible to me. What I do fear though is the immediate discomfort of an inflamed gut and skin breakouts and impaired leptin signaling, all of which are risks of straying from carnivore. The ironic thing is that people think that I have an eating disorder because I eat carnivore, but it's like, no, I have an unsustainable relationship with food, and that's why I need to stay carnivore. The lack of variety is firstly BS. I mean, you can eat as much variety as you want when you do nose to tail, but also variety is nowhere near as important for sustainability as being consistently satiated and nourished. If you intuitively eat only the foods that make you feel and look your best, then that's the definition of sustainability. I'll admit that I lost a little too much muscle mass from undereating on raw carnivore, particularly undereating fat, which could have caused some protein metabolism. But I'm getting back into the gym at the moment, and I'm doing a higher fat approach with more cooked meat, so I don't think that this is going to happen again. But to be fair, people also don't understand the concept of a morning fasted waistline. If I'm only eating one meal per day in the afternoon, then obviously I'm going to look super lean when I haven't eaten for like 20 hours. The getting back into the gym thing is also a little ironic now that I understand my previous pursuit of bigger and bigger muscles was complete cope, and what I really wanted at the time was a de-bloated jaw and waist, and more height obviously. I'd say I'm actually more satisfied with my physique now than I was a couple years ago when I looked ready to step on stage at any moment, and that's because I'm no longer looking in the mirror thinking I need to look more jacked, then all my problems are going to go away. But this time I'm going to focus a little more on the strength and performance aspect of it, and it won't feel like as much of a cope. But I'm still going to keep promoting the effortless lean maxing content because that's still something I believe in. I'm just going to make sure I stop accidentally undereating. Speaking of which, my plan for the next month is to just do a strict carnivore diet with a mix of raw and cooked meats, eggs, butter and fat trimmings, and maybe a little yogurt and cream too. I am in two minds about including the yogurt at all, but I figure as long as I'm not adding suboptimal things to it, and as long as it's a good quality A2 Greek yogurt, then it's fine. Definitely no more of the low quality ultra pasteurized crap with the added nuts and berries that I can hear audibly digesting. Also, I won't be drinking raw milk at the moment because unfortunately my source is closing down for the winter. So no more blood milkshakes or homemade kefir sadly, because they were actually super satiating. I'll also keep the added salt and the salted dairy cut out as well, along with all other added flavorings because it delays my satiety signal and causes water retention. I might do a bit of sour cream and yogurt dips though, because I can sustain it and it makes eating more enjoyable. I'll definitely not be smoking anymore though. Stay tuned for some nuanced content about the negative effects of smoking weed. One thing I do want to try is actually having less variety in my meals, because if you've seen my full days of eatings, especially the OMAD ones, you might notice that I have like 10 different kinds of meat sometimes, and organs. But I want to try keeping it simple from now on, and I think this will be freeing. I'm also getting kind of sick of having to cook everything and sharing half my food with my girlfriend, so that's another reason to go back to more raw meat or just slightly seared meat. If this all sounds like an extreme thought process to you, or you just think I'm straight up mental, I kind of get where you're coming from, but I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't necessary for my goals and sustainability. The ironic thing is that most normies don't even realize that they have issues with leptin sensitivity and inflammation. They think that their cravings and digestion are normal, without actually understanding the mechanisms behind it. That's why there's no point in even arguing with them or trying to bring up nutrition around a normie. If they start the argument, sure, I'll gladly smack them around, but otherwise it's really not worth attention. Anyway, a bit of a rant for you today, but I wanted to share my anecdote about how even just deviating into regular keto or having the odd cheat meal can actually be very unsustainable for people like me. It was pretty surprising to me how quickly I fell back into old habits like tracking my macros, counting my steps, and using exercise to determine how much I eat. I also figure that by posting this, it'll force me to be accountable. And if I decide to deviate again from the diet, I'll be public about it, and it'll be to try my low anti-nutrient ketovore diet, which is the next best thing to carnivore, or maybe a low-carb animal-based diet in a few months when it's seasonally appropriate. Face IQ's right when he says that the strictness of your diet needs to justify the results, but for me the opposite is also true, that the leniency of your diet needs to justify the sustainability, and that's why I gotta stay carnivore. And it's not even that I stopped being carnivore. I was still eating 80% animal products, which fits the definition. It just wasn't as sustainable as strict carnivore is though. I hope you guys find this type of content interesting. Check out my other videos if you want to learn more about my dieting philosophy and carnivore science, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.